Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. We are back with another banger today. We're taking a beautiful tour of the dairy farm, and if you look closely, I think I just saw a cow whisper a secret about today's ice cream flavor. Now that's what I call a scoop of gossip. As at the recording of this video, the guided tour is $15 plus tax, and it's worth every penny. Honestly, you guys have to check this out. You can purchase your tickets from their website, and we have also included the link here for you guys. If you're curious to know what they sell here, we posted an in-store video, so make sure you check it out. The stars of the show today were Farmer Dave, calling us back out to go and enjoy the tour, and the cows. So until next time, stay cheesy.
Cool for me, but coming on the tour.
Generation here. Everybody can call me Farmer Dave. So I milk cows every day or every other day or almost every day for 50 years along with my brother. And now my brother's son is in charge of the farm. We've been here since 1947. We've been milking cows almost 80 years here. And this is just a year and a half old now. The reason we called it Summit Station is, for those not familiar with the area, is there's a hiking and biking trail now from the Conservation Authority starting in Hamilton and going west to Brantford. This is the highest spot on that railway line. This is where the name Summit Station came from. There was a Summit Station, smaller building on the other side of the highway. If you walk along that rail trail, there's a little signage area, a little wooden area, and that's where the train station was. And if you step into that wooden area, you will see the concrete foundation of the old water tower that used to fill the steam engines up out of the bog. And so that railway line ran from the late 1890s to the mid 1970s. And then the Conservation Authority took it over, and now it's that hiking and biking trail. The Paris to Ancaster bike race goes on it, and that type of thing. The red brick house you see straight across the way, that was the station master's house. And that station master, they used to send milk cans to the city of Hamilton every day. We have if you go to our website, you'll see some archival pictures of ladies sitting on milk cans. So milk cans went from all the little local farmers at that time. Every day the train took milk into Hamilton, and Hamilton in the early 1900s had 13 dairies. And we had Royal Oak and Silverwoods and Borden's and a lot of smaller ones that were there for a relatively short period of time. The last one really to shut down in Hamilton was Royal Oak Dairy, for those of you familiar from the area. So we used to send our milk to Royal Oak. But basically every farm along the way used to milk cows, not very many. There was at one time in this 5-mile stretch of road, there were 32 dairy farms. And at this point, we're the only one left. But so trucks went back and forth. You used to take milk cans to the end of the lane every morning, and the truck would come along and pick them up and take them to the dairy. Some of the things that we're doing environmentally here, because the dairy industry is committed to being carbon neutral by 2050. So we're doing a lot of things environmentally. One of the ones that we're doing is this asphalt that you see in the parking lot, and I know it's got some potholes in it, but that kind of goes with the territory because that was recycled asphalt from the Lincoln Alexander Parkway in Hamilton. And so that's porous, and water seeps down through, it doesn't actually run off, but that's why you still have some potholes there. The plants that you see growing up in that railway line that we had constructed, working with our landscape architect, those are indigenous drought-resistant plants that would grow up in an abandoned railway line. So that's why they're selected here as well. As we get a little further along, you'll see our solar field. So we erected a solar field about a year and a half ago that now powers everything here and everything on the farm. So it's 375 kilowatts. We're doing a lot of things, and we'll talk about that with the cows environmentally. Crop-wise, we farm about 850 acres. So we just planted the alfalfa about 3 weeks ago now. This field back here that we just see a little bit of dirt there showing that was corn planted about 10 days ago. When you walk along as we go over there, you'll see little corn plants sneaking through, shivering just like we are. And but we do also do a lot of things environmentally, crop-wise. So that field was corn last year, so that's harvested the whole plant corn. But then when that's harvested, we go in and plant oats in for the winter time, so that grows up and that holds the soil in place, and that is better for carbon sequestration and erosion as well. And that oats dies off over the winter. The frost will kill it, so it doesn't regrow in the spring. And then we planted corn in that as well. But we also grow a crop called triticale. That's a hybrid between wheat and rye, and that we plant after some corn fields in the fall. And that we just harvested about 150 acres of that this week. So that grows up again in the spring, and again stops erosion, but then it allows us to double crop, because when we just took that triticale off this week, as I said, and we're going to plant corn in that next week as well. So those fields are never bare, and so it's much better environmentally. We really are committed to be as environmentally friendly as we can. That's why we have the glass bottles. And that's why those little sample cups, those little plastic ones of sampling milk that you can try in the store, those are actually compostable as well. So we're making every effort that we can to keep the environment, not only keep it, with our crop rotation plan that we have, it's kind of a 5-year rotation, 2 years of corn followed by 3 years of a crop, either triticale or alfalfa. So at the end of that 5-year period between the manure and the crop rotation we have, the goal is to have that soil better than it was the previous 5 years. Keep adding to it, and that's part of it. It's in our mission statement to leave the environment better than we found it. So we can walk along, and we'll talk a little bit more about some things, and then get into the barn and see some cows. And don't worry, cows cannot bite you. They never get teeth on top. The reason we have this sign here that says cows only beyond this point is for our cows' safety and for your safety. We have a lot of people that come to the store and want to walk around and see the cows, but we really can't let that happen unless they're unaccompanied, because there's big machinery going here. We really can't pay attention to little kids walking around, because it is a big active farm. And also from a biosecurity standpoint, that's why we have the boots on you, first of all to keep you clean, but also to keep our cows healthy. So that's why we sort of restrict it to an organized tour. But we're happy to show everybody everything. We really are, and we want to answer all your questions and dispel some myths and that kind of thing. So please feel free to ask any question. But that's why we have that time. Pardon? Yeah, you can touch them. Absolutely, you can touch them. Yeah, cows aren't pets. Some will back away from you if you hold out your hand. They might smell you. They might lick you. This one's being curious today. Maybe one of the two of you are in heat. So you can come right in.
Adorable.
So that's why we had that. out in here, the first thing I want you to notice, there's 500 head in here almost. You don't hear anything. It tells me they're completely happy. This is exactly what I want to hear, is nothing. Because they're well fed, they're comfortable, they have lots of room, they have lots of fresh air, there's nothing bothering them. You might hear the odd one moo or something like that, but generally they're very, very content. And that's exactly what I want to hear.
You want it to lick you?
The other thing is, you cannot tell a cow is pregnant by looking at her, even up until the last minute before they give birth. This whole group of young ones, so these are all youngsters here. These are all under 2 years of age, so they've never had a calf yet. They've never started to give us milk yet, to lactate. So these are just young ones growing up, inventory growing up. These are all pregnant in this last group here. But most of these cows that you look at, these are lactating cows. Most of these cows are pregnant at the same time as lactating. So the cow will lactate for the first 7 months of gestation. For the last 2 months of gestation, we give her a rest period. But most of these cows are at various stages of pregnancy. So there's a lot of things to talk about in here. You see each of these cows has a collar on. So those are like Fitbits for cows. Okay. So when she goes through the milking area, it'll identify who she is. It'll record how much milk she's given, how fast she's given it, how many times she's rested during the day, how long she rested each time. It'll talk about her pedometry, how many steps she's taken in the last 8 hours. And also, in that little blue box behind their left ear is a microphone, and that microphone records how many times a day she swallows. So that's a really good indicator of health for us. And so all those metrics, it becomes management by exception. As long as this cow has done within 10% of each of those metrics, 10% of her pedometry, whatever, we don't really hear about her, but if she's outside of any one of those metrics, we get an exception list at the end of each milking. So that's, so even though we have 1,000 head of cattle on this farm, we know way more about each one than we had 50. And it's non-invasive. So it's really great technology, getting better all the time. Some of the things we're doing environmentally, the bovine genome was mapped in the early 2000s, so all these animals have tissue samples taken. We know the DNA on all these animals. So we're able to breed now for cows that are more feed efficient, which means these two cows may eat exactly the same amount of feed each day, but this one might produce 1 more liter of milk on that amount of feed. So we can identify those cows as an industry. We can, or the sires of those cows as an industry. So those are additive genes that I can. And the other thing is, I can also select for cows that produce less methane. So that's about 1% a year less methane, but that becomes additive as well, generation after generation. And we're also, some of the original work was done here. We work very, very closely with the University of Guelph, the veterinary college there. So we're also able to breed for cows that are better able to withstand a health challenge. Their immune system responds better to a health challenge or metabolic challenge. So we've never bred healthier, more productive cows. Since I graduated university, which is now 50 years ago, milk production per cow has doubled. And that's all due to genetics, comfort, and nutrition. And the crop guys on the same side, production per acre of corn or acre of hay has doubled in that time too. So the industry is really, really advancing in a lot of ways. One of the other things that we're doing for less methane, we're feeding an additive, a natural seaweed additive that reduces methane output by about 11%. So we're doing that as well. So the industry is really quite committed to a lot of things. So today, I know it's a little fresh for people, but this is an ideal temperature for cows. Cows are thermal neutral at 5 degrees Celsius. You have to remember, cows come from the Ice Age. And so that's why you see all these fans in the barn. They're not on today. They kick in at 18 degrees Celsius. And in the real hot weather, the real days, the hot, muggy weather in the summertime, the cows get soaked down 3 times when they're milked in the milking area, and then fans blowing on them then to keep them cool as well. We do milk the cows 3 times a day, so we're just about to start the second one. First one starts at 4 in the morning, the next one at 4 at noon, and the next one at 8 o'clock at night. So there's 3 shifts, so each cow gets milked 3 times a day. And right now they're averaging about 45, 46 liters per cow per day. And so, but that means some of your top cows that are just recently calved, they're at 16, 70 liters per cow per day.
1,000 cows 2 times a day.
Well, they're milking about 420. And then when you have cows on their rest period, and these are all youngsters growing up. So these are all, there's 6 different groups here because they're different size animals, so we can't have them compete with bigger ones. So we start off at that end at about 6 months of age, and then grow up at about 3-month increments. So this group here about 22 months of age. So we have older cows here. Some cows that have produced 8-9 calves in their lifetime. We want each cow to have a calf a year. So the cow has her calf, she starts lactating, she peaks about 10 weeks after she's had her calf, and then the milk production slowly starts to tail off. But if she calves again, you'll get another peak. So the biggest reason for cows leaving here is not getting pregnant, reproductive failure. We get about 4.5 average number of calvings per cow, but having said that, we have cows that have 8, 9, 10 calves here, but then you also have young ones that only ever get pregnant once and don't get pregnant again. So that's the biggest reason for cows leaving here. In terms of foot care, so we have our podiatrist, our hoof trimmer comes every 2 weeks, and we have a list of cows. It's just their turn to have their feet trimmed. We try to get them trimmed twice a year, and they also go through a foot bath 3 times a week to stop any bacterial infection in between hoof trimmings, but there's a very strict hoof trimming protocol. One of the big breakthroughs in recent years is we're able to use sex semen where I can get 90% females instead of 50-50. So what that does for me, I don't need to be all the females I can generate, so I don't need to breed everybody to have a female calf. I just need a certain number of cows to produce as much milk as I need to produce. What that allows me to do is I can get females from my best females. So these young ones here are all my best genetics theoretically, and so they're all bred to sex semen because I want my next generation to come from there. These are some of these old cows that are 10, 11 years old, still great milk cows, but genetically not as good as these cows. So I breed them to beef bulls and I sell the crossbred calves to someone that raises them for me. The other nice thing about using sex semen is the female calf is generally just a little smaller by 2 or 3 kilos than a male calf. So it's a much easier first time birth for these ones here as well. So there's a fair bit going on in here. We have this automatic scraper going continually. It's like a poo Zamboni. Just scraping along. It scrapes in near to the middle of the barn. It falls into a channel. It gets pumped down near storage. That gets analyzed by a top consultant. It goes on the field. Fertilized. This is really it. So the barn is set for summertime now. The curtains are down. The doors are all open. In the wintertime, the curtains will go up to stop the wind. And then but it's not, cows, they're working hard. They produce a lot of heat themselves. This barn never gets really warm in the wintertime, but it doesn't freeze either. You have to think, a cow's averaging 45 liters per day. That's, in human terms, that's equivalent of running a marathon a day. So you have to think to yourself, what temperature would I like to run a marathon? This would be pretty nice weather to run a marathon, but 30 degrees Celsius, not so much. So that's why we have these fans to keep these cows cool and comfortable all the time. In terms of the diet, we work very, very closely with our nutritionists. Believe it or not, they are cow dietitians, and they're very, very important to us. If you look at this side here versus this side here, 2 very different looking rations. Right? This one is predominantly corn silage. That's the whole plant corn chopped up. That's a high energy feed because they need about 50,000 calories a day to do what they're doing. So they get corn and soy meal and other things. These guys here, they're like teenagers growing up. We want them to have good bone mass and good muscle, but we don't want them to get overweight. So it's a much less dense ration for them. So as I said, there's 6 different diets on the farm, depending if they're young ones growing up, lactating ones, or cows on their rest period. There's 2 different rest periods, and so these are carefully. See that? It looks like a car wash brush over there, that big yellow car wash. So as soon as they bump up against it, it'll start to scratch their back. It'll rotate. Anything to relieve stress.
The older ones that are
Okay, what do you do with the older cows?
well, like they're not good for beef anymore, right?
They are, but they're not. You won't get your prime cuts.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so the question is, what happens to older cows? Okay, they have a career change. But you'll meet some in our store, but there's nothing wrong with the meat. It's just that it's not. You're not going to get your prime porterhouse or rib steaks out of them because they're not bred for it. the good steaks that you buy in your store, your good roast that you buy, they'll be from animals that are 18 to 24 months of age, and they've been bred for it and fed for it. So these cows, they make great hamburger, they make great stewing beef, they make great hamburger patties or meatloaf or whatever. You put them in a slow cooker and it's fine. It's just you don't have the marbling, you don't have the fat on them to make your real good steaks.
And what age is that kind of career change usually?
Well, we get about 4.5 calves per cow, but as I said, but sometimes they leave sooner because they don't get pregnant. But some of these older cows that are 10, you'll still get 700 or 800 pounds of beef from them, right. But it'll all be ground beef or hamburger or stewing beef. But it's not like people always think about it as disease in dog food. That's not the case at all. Like food is super safe in Canada, and as a primary producer, it bothers me. People food has never been safer, and people have never been more afraid to eat. Right? It's incredibly safe in terms of what we go through in that store, washing things up and everything, and the inspections and that. Food is really, really safe. If you think you got 40 million Canadians eating 3 meals a day, and some people more than that, I mean, there's not very many outbreaks that we have. Sure, you get some recalls on stuff, but overall, it's pretty safe. It's pretty safe.
So sorry, to just add to the gentleman's question. So is their life expectancy about 10 years? 10
Well,
years?
in the wild, they would probably live to about 17 years old. But they
10-ish years.
Yeah, but the biggest reason that our cows leave is not getting pregnant again.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But again, really quiet in here.
On this side.
You can touch the cow.
You want to go touch it, Mary?
Try this.
Do you want to try it, Nora? Do you want to put your hand on my hand and they'll do it together?
Look at Nora.
No, they're averaging 45 liters per cow per day.
Do you want to just pet it? Do you want to just pet it, Nora? And not have it lick you? You don't have to. You don't want to. You want to just get it and pet it? Or you want it to pet it? He's way up there. Dorothy?
So this is the group of Valentina, and I will find Valentina for you.
Who knows?
So that's Valentina with the heart marking on her side.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Go.
What a hard mark for this one.
Okay, wait a minute. We gotta wait for the thing to come on, I guess. Wait, is it on? Okay. There's the picture there.
This is a little truer north-south that you see here as opposed to these barns that are not, and when they're on the ground and can move, they're about 20% more efficient. But you do need 2.5 acres.
Yeah.
And they actually don't move with the sun. They're programmed as so this is where the sun is on the 24th day. So they're programmed astronomically as to where the sun is. It's not like it's...
Don't walk too far.
So this is our kitchen. So everything you see under the plastic and under the tires is feed that we grow ourselves, but that's harvested at high moisture, so it ferments in its own juices, but if it gets exposed to air, it would spoil. So the plastic keeps it fresh, and the tires are nothing more than weight to keep the plastic in place. We're actually feeding from the far end. You see just a little bit of exposed there. So we take 3 or 4 rows of tires off each week. That's enough for us to last the week, but it will stay ahead of any kind of spoilage. So that's packed in there very, very tightly. The silo directly in front of me is the one we just filled this week with treated kale. It takes about 40 tons a day to feed the herd, and on a hot summer day we'll go through 100 ton of water. So we have a whole water treatment system. That pond you see just in the distance between the trees, that's our water source for the cows. That's spring fed, is supplemented by a well, and that surface runoff, and we have a whole water treatment center, like chlorinators, filters, UV lights, so the cows get really good quality water. So so as I said, everything you see there we grow. Everything in that barn facing us is dry, just like rice in your house, so it doesn't need to be covered in plastic. It just stays fresh on your shelves. It doesn't spoil. So those are different commodities, some chopped straw, some soy meal. One of the things that we sort of have to deal with is that people say, well, why are we feeding all this stuff to cattle when we feed it directly to people? And that's true to a point, but there's a lot of byproducts that get fed to cattle. What's in that one commodity bay down there is soybean oil meal, which is a byproduct of the oil crushing industry. One of our silos down there is got beet pulp. That's a byproduct of the sugar industry, beet pulp. Certain times of the year, and depending on the Canadian dollar, we can bring in cottonseed from North Carolina, which is a byproduct of the cotton industry, and the cotton seeds out of the cotton ball, they actually look like Q-tips. That's a good feed for cattle. So there's a lot of this stuff that would go to landfills if it wouldn't get marketed through beef cattle or dairy cattle. They could turn relatively low quality protein into high quality protein. I had there was a farm near London, Ontario, close to the Kellogg's plant. He was a beef farmer. Every now and again you get a tractor trailer and a load of Fruit Loops that had too many greens. People are really fussy about what they eat. If an apple's got scabbed or a potato doesn't look nice, they're not going to buy it, but you put it in cattle feed and they do great on it. So there's millions of tons of feed in North America that get recycled through cattle that would end up in landfills and create more methane. 3 or 4 empty silos when we harvest all the corn. So then we get the McMaster University rowing team here, and they come out on a Sunday morning and they put all the tires on for us. And that's their best fundraiser of the year. And they do in about 3 hours they get it all covered. We have pizza and pop, and they take 1 million selfies to show their parents what great kids they are. Yeah. So the cow's year is such that she has her calf. We try to get her pregnant by between 60 and 100 days after calving, and so gestation is 9 months. So for the first 7 months of that gestation, she milks. For the last 2 months, we stop and give her a rest period. And for the last, and they move to a different barn, a different area, and a different ration. And for the last 3 weeks of gestation, they come here, and this is where they're going to have their calves. So everybody you see in this barn right now is due to calve within the next 2.5 weeks. So we do 600 births a year. So 50 a month on average. So again, a different diet, a little different. We like them to calve out on these straw as opposed to sand. It's just more comfortable for them, and it works better for them.
Yeah, it's huge.
But you really can't tell they're pregnant. I know they look big to you, but you really can't. Every now and again we get fooled. The main thing to notice in this barn is how many more fans are in this barn compared to the others. So this was the last barn that we constructed. And we know from research that cows that are heat stressed in the latter part of gestation, they will produce less milk when they have their calf. The fetus that she's carrying will produce less milk when it grows up, and the next generation will produce less milk. So that's epigenetics, how the environment affects the expression of your gene. It's the same as intergenerational trauma, how you have grandkids from people that were in residential schools and still showing some of the effects. It's exactly the same thing. So that's why we have all these extra fans here to keep these cows cooler in the latter part of gestation. And the other thing we do socially So each group of these cows are all due, each particular group is all due to calve within in 1 week's time period. So we don't introduce new cows in to cause social disruption. It's just like putting a new person in an old age home in the dining room. It makes a mess for a day or two until everybody settles down. And it's exactly the same thing. So we try to keep these groups as stable as possible without introducing new members. Enter in the computer how many kilograms of feed he wants to mix. And then in that computer is the whole ration for the cows, the whole diet. And it'll tell them, okay, you feed 6,000 kilograms of corn. And that machine is on a set of scales, and it'll keep filling up until it gets to 6,000 kilograms, and then it advances to the next ingredient. And inside there are two big screw augers that mix everything together. Cows are like kids, they're going to eat the icing, not the cake. So you have to mix it all together so they can't sort out what they like. So that's why these things are cut as fine as they are, so they don't have long pieces of hay that they can nuzzle out of the way and just get to the grain, because they will upset their own diet. So that's this is carefully monitored stuff. That each diet, that everything is the right proportion of grain and hay and grass and everything together. These are really finely tuned diets.
How many cows you have overall?
Overall, there's a little under 1,000 head here, counting the young ones. So right now we're milking about 430, I think. And then there's cows on their rest period and young ones growing up. Thank you. For the first 2.5 months. So they come out here when they're born, and they're fine winter and summer out here. They're just like kids in a snowsuit. You put them out there, and they're grass free and dry and well fed, and they do extremely well out here. So they get milk 3 times a day, so they're upwards of 12 liters of milk a day.
And they're socially, like, you've got a feeling that one.
Okay. So right now these are set up for the summertime. So this is south and this is north. So in the summertime we face them north to stay out of the hot sun. In the winter time we reverse them and face them south so they get the sun. Pretty low tech, but pretty effective.
Oh, they're beautiful. They're so big.
Yeah, they're born
like
with teeth.
They're perfect.
They're born with teeth.
Look. Look at the...
Nope. So right now the milk is actually going into this feeder right here. So every day when the transporter comes, and so one of the concerns people have are antibiotics in milk. What's the difference between conventional milk and organic milk or whatever? You can rest assured there are no antibiotics in any milk, whether it's conventional or organic, grass-fed, whatever. There's no, and the way that's ensured. Now, we are not an organic farm. I use commercial fertilizers. I use herbicides on our corn. And if I have a cow that's ill and needs an antibiotic therapy, I'm going to do the best care I can for her, and I'm going to put her on a course of antibiotics. But I cannot sell that milk. And I have to keep that milk out of these tanks. And there's all kinds of safeguards that we do to make sure that doesn't happen. But to ensure that there's no antibiotics in any supply, so each morning when our transporter comes, he takes a sample of milk before he loads it into this bigger truck. Okay? So he keeps those samples on his truck. Then when they get to the processor, whether it's Saputo or Gelu or whoever, before they offload that big truck, they do test that milk for antibiotic residue. It's an extremely sensitive test. If that tank tests positive for antibiotics, that milk immediately goes to a landfill. It never ever makes it into the food chain. It is extremely rare that it happens. So last year in Ontario, keeping in mind we have about 3,000 dairy farms in Ontario, they each get picked up on an average of 200 times a year. We get picked up every day because we're bigger, but on average they get picked up every other day. So give or take 200 times a year. So we do 3,000 times 200 times. And last year there were only 13 loads in all of Ontario that tested positive. So you're looking at 0.0 whatever percent. But again, that milk goes to a landfill. But now when they've tested that milk, and if the tank did test positive, you got the individual samples from the individual farm. So then you go through and find out who the offending farm was. And And in our case, the penalty would be like $20,000 fine, plus you have to pay for all the milk. So mistakes happen. Rare that they happen, but the take-home message for you is that there's no antibiotics in any milk. And generally, the dilution factor would be so great that even if you were susceptible to penicillin or something, you probably wouldn't get enough of it that it would cause a reaction. Where it also becomes a concern is that if that particular tank of milk is going to go to a cultured product like yogurt or cheese, because now the culture won't grow. Yeah, so the advantages that we have here with the 2 tanks of milk, and most farms only have 1, is we have a group of cows that are A2, so, and that's what our milk is. So some people that are susceptible to the protein in the milk, not the lactose. So some cows are naturally what's called A1, A1, some cows are A1, A2, and some cows are A2, A2. So we've genomically tested the herd. All the milk that goes to our plant is A2, A2 milk. And the difference is only 1 amino acid out of the 220 amino acids that make up milk. But since we've opened, I probably had maybe a dozen people say they used to have trouble drinking milk, but have no trouble drinking the A2, A2 milk. So that's why you see some of it on shelves. You see A2, A2 butter. Guernseys are naturally, that's another breed of cows. They're all naturally A2, A2. But we genomically tested, and we're also breeding for A2, A2 cows going forward. So what you're going to see now when we go into the milking area, as I said, the cows get milked. Each cow gets milked 3 times a day. They come into the actual milking area. They do either a hard right turn or a hard left turn. People working there, 2 people working there. They will prep the cow. By that I mean they'll kind of dust off her udder. They'll dip each quarter, each teat with an iodine solution, a very weak iodine solution to kill any bacteria. They leave it on for a number of seconds. They'll do 3 or 4 cows at a time. They'll come back, dry that off, and take a few strips of milk out of each quarter by hand. And so what that does, it does a number of things. First of all, you're checking the milk that it's normal and white, and but also it stimulates oxytocin for the cow. It tells the cow, okay, now it's milking time. So any of you that have been nursing mothers know all about oxytocin, and so we have to know that. You cannot suck milk out of a cow if she doesn't want to give it to you. The cow has to be calm and quiet. If a cow's nervous, you can put a milker on there for hours, and she will not get any milk out of that cow. They have to want to give it. So it's a very set routine. It's calm. It's quiet. And it's not painful at all. When we go in there, you can put your finger in a milking machine and you'll feel what a cow feels. So then you'll hear a clicking sound. So the clicking sound is there's a steel shell, and inside that steel shell is a rubber liner, and that rubber liner opens and collapses with vacuum. See, so, and if you put your finger in a vacuum cleaner, it's just going to turn red. Right? But if you put your finger in a thing, it'll open and close to let blood flow back and forth and let milk flow back down into the teat. So that's what that clicking sound is. And these are really carefully measured times. We're talking milliseconds. So it's very, very important. The other thing is, so the first time cows, because they have to go in and make this turn, so they really don't know how to do that. So the ones that have just had their first calf and have never been milked before, you sort of get it up behind them, you sort of walk slowly behind them and muscle them over as quietly as you can, because what happens in that first 2 or 3 times that the cow's being milked, they remember that their whole lives. So it's not pleasurable. If it's been an unpleasant experience, somebody yelled at them, somebody hit them, they'll remember that their whole lives. They'll always be reluctant to come in. So it's very important that everybody is uniform as to how they treat these animals. So we can go in there and we can milk the cow.
Okay, cool. Here we go, Georgie. Here to Georgie.
Put your thumb and forefinger, squeeze it together gently and pull down at the same time. She's actually a really easy. There you go.
Oh. Wow.
So now we'll see.
That was good.
You want to try? Sure.